Hello, lovely chosen ones. The truth doesn't set you free until it destroys all that was constructed on the falsehood. Take a moment to think about it because we're not going to sugarcoat anything today. We're going to talk about the raw, unfiltered facts that most people avoid. And the selected ones, like you, had to consume it without any notice. This isn't one of those things that makes you feel fantastic. Just have faith in the process. Talks about pep. No. This is the type of truth that makes you feel good. Your ego begins to sweat, and your spirit starts to speak. Someone finally stated it. This is something that not many people know. Neuroscience has shown that the brain responds to the truth in the same manner that it reacts to pain. That's why people become scared when you say things that break through the illusion. That's why they couldn't deal with you. You stayed the same. You stopped being stupid, and all of a sudden, you're acting differently. You're too much. You're the issue now. You simply made your spirit better while they were still loading. So be ready, because what we're going to talk about is unpleasant, uncomfortable, and totally important. This isn't a TED Talk. It's a spiritual intervention. Oh, and don't worry, I'll add just the right amount of comedy to prevent your third eye from twitching too much. Let's get started. The truth is coming, and it doesn't need cosmetics. First of all, they don't detest you. They don't like that you didn't break when they would have. They don't detest you because you done anything bad. They detest you because you didn't give up when they would have. You stood up when it didn't make sense to do so. They were counting on seeing a broken down version of you, yet you stepped there with power in your eyes. That's what makes every one of them unique. It's not that you were fortunate, it's that you were made differently, and they know it. People don't often say this out loud, but most people just root for you. When they play savior, they have power over your tail, or at the very least, keep ahead of you. But when you get up without their permission, recover without their aid, and triumph without them even knowing how, that's when their false grins start to move. They become angry because you didn't break down as they thought you would. A lot of people thought you would fail. Some people even made plans for it. They smiled at you and made mental notes of your flaws. They kept your secrets like weapons. But they didn't take into account your inner fire. Your capacity to go through betrayal, shame, and loneliness without becoming bitter or damaged. That type of survival affects their whole identity because it makes them confront the truth that they gave up much too quickly in their own life. They'd rather call you arrogant, odd, insane, or too deep than confess that seeing you shine from the ashes shows how little they're doing with their own grief. You didn't simply live, you changed. And change is bad for folks who want to remain put. The worst part for them is that you didn't simply go away. You came back stronger, calmer, and smarter, not needing praise but feeling good about yourself. They don't dislike you because you're doing well. They despise you because your calmness makes their turmoil clear. Your strength shows how much they want to avoid you. Your rise seems like a personal attack on their comfort zone. And here's the best part. If you had sold your soul to get it, they would probably appreciate you more. But you didn't. You were honest. And that fact is what scares them the most. 2. You are evidence that bloodlines can be changed. And it scares everyone in your family. You're not simply getting well for yourself. You're mending for folks who have been dead for a long time, and for individuals who haven't even been born yet. That's the unpleasant truth. No one says it out loud. You were brought to your family not simply to make it, but to break patterns that have been going on for decades or even centuries. You were the one who saw something was wrong and stated, "Something's not right here," while everyone else acted like nothing was wrong. That's why you were always the odd one out, the one who got blamed, and the one who was too sensitive. You were the first to challenge the harmful activities that were called tradition. You were the one who couldn't sit still when things weren't working well. They made you feel like you were the issue because of it. But the reality is they were afraid of something about you. They understood you were meant to stop the pattern. You were the menace to generational denial that walked. And this is what truly hurts. The folks you're attempting to aid by mending are the ones who resist you the hardest. It's not that they don't care. It's because your change undermines the tale that makes up their complete identity. If you become better, they have to concede that becoming better is feasible if you climb. They have to accept that they settled. And most individuals would rather attack you than look in the mirror. You're not only changing your life, you're moving a bloodline ahead. Every line you draw, every lie you tell, and every emotional scar you decide to heal. And everything makes waves. Your bravery is breaking curses that have been in your family longer than your name. And let's be honest, that task is tiring. It hurts, it's lonely, but it's also wonderful. You weren't only brought here to live. You were brought here to start again. You are the hard reset button that your forefathers longed for, even if they never lived long enough to say it. And even if no one claps for you today, future generations will be able to live more freely because you didn't give up. That's what you leave behind. And no matter how hard they try, they can't stop it. Third, they used your innocence as a weapon because they thought it was stupidity. They didn't come for you because you were weak. They came for you because you were clean. And in a world that thrives on trickery, people regard purity as a bad thing, not a good thing. You weren't stupid. You merely gave individuals an opportunity to show you who they truly were. And when they showed you, you didn't become angry. You saw. You made mental notes. You were silent. That was the thing that scared them the most. You didn't respond the way they wanted you to. You didn't yell, fight, or lose it. Someone is watching you. And your silence said volumes. They felt you were simple to handle since you were kind. They thought that your ability to feel for others rendered you blind. They thought they had the upper hand since you weren't cheating. But this is the reality. You saw everything. You saw all the passive-aggressive barbs, faux support, and gossip behind her back that was really worry. You opted not to reply with the same intensity. That's what made them think you were dangerous. They didn't understand that your quiet was never a sign of weakness. It was smart. You were weighing the expense of responding against the cost of keeping your calm. And that's when the guilt hit them, when they realized you knew the entire time. That's when the falsehoods had to grow stronger. They had to change the story to shield themselves from the shame of being found out, as no one likes to acknowledge they attempted to trick someone who already understood what was going on. And when you eventually left, there was no drama. It was the end. But they thought it was punishment. Not because you injured them, but because you took away something genuine, something uncommon, and something they now know they can't get back. So what did they do? Try to change the tale. Tried to pretend you weren't real. Too touchy, overreacting. But they knew what they'd done deep inside. And much more they know you knew. The fact is that they didn't kill you. They ruined their own prospects with someone who just wanted to help. And now since you aren't talking, it's the loudest evidence of all. You grew out of their falsehoods without saying anything. You were their last test, and they failed in a big way. You were more than simply a buddy, brother, a partner, or a support system. You were a providential stop along the way for someone. A last test to determine whether they were ready to develop, change, and go on to the next stage of their own journey. And what did they do with that chance? They failed not just once, but many times, and they did it in a way that was loud, public, and arrogant, which still haunts them. You came with open hands and an open heart, and you spoke to me like you were wise. You were patient with them when they needed space. You showed them kindness, even when they gave you reasons to leave. You offered them a secure environment to be themselves, heal, and think. But they acted like your existence didn't matter since they couldn't see what you were at the time. They saw you as simply another person, another emotional crutch, another good person they could use, control, or ignore. But they didn't see this. You were the last warning from heaven. Nor punishment, nor getting back at someone. A chance. One final opportunity to change their bad habits, face their own actions, and treat someone with the respect they said they wanted to receive. You were the exam that might have changed their lives for good. You were the way for them to change. They didn't go through it. Instead, they smashed it in their own face. Now, the same cycles they refuse to break are killing them. The same tricks that used to work suddenly don't work. The individuals they picked instead of you have turned against them. The elevator is blocked for them. They are not at ease, and your presence is like a movie playing over and over in their mind. They can't stop, not because of guilt, but because of revelation. The knowledge that you were the genuine deal, and they messed up. This is what occurs when someone doesn't pass their heavenly exam. Life doesn't simply go on. It changes the whole narrative. And in this new form, you are no longer the lesson they are. Fifth, people don't stop talking to you because you've done anything bad. They disappear because your light is too precise. People don't speak about the true cause too often. They keep their distance from you. It's not because you were overly emotional, poisonous, or demanding. That's simply what they say to make themselves feel better. The truth. Your enthusiasm was too real, too honest, and too on point. You didn't expose them with what you said. Just by being there, you exposed them. You were like a mirror that showed them bits of themselves they had tried hard to ignore. People don't lean in when they see that degree of spiritual correctness. They run. They didn't ghost you because of what you did. They ghosted you because of what you showed them. You made them face things they've been concealing behind charm, performance, and shallow ties with you for years. They couldn't act like they couldn't change the tale. Your presence cut right through the version of themselves they were trying to present to the world. That was scary. Some individuals want to connect with others so much that they would lie. Until it makes them grow. They claim they seek love, healing, and depth. But when they meet someone who really exemplifies those traits, it's too much. Because they are being pushed, not pampered. People are looking at them, not having fun. So they go away. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were too much for them. They didn't feel comfortable with you emotionally. You didn't make it simple for them to keep lying. You didn't act little to make them feel safe. You came in completely, honestly, and without apology. And it was enough to make them go into self-imposed exile. The fact is that your life didn't terrify them because it was too bright. They were afraid because it was so true. You didn't make a judgment on them. You merely reminded them of what they hadn't gotten over. And some individuals would prefer not deal with that degree of reality than face it. So don't take their quiet to heart. It's not a no. It's avoiding spirituality. You were never too much. You were simply too genuine. You're not too much, number 6. They simply can't get enough of superficial things. People have undoubtedly told you that you are too passionate, dramatic, emotional, or profound. Like it's a defect in your character. But those labels weren't really about you. They were for them. They weren't ready for what you were carrying. You weren't simply another shallow relationship. They could tell it right away. You didn't live at the shallow end, where people spoke about nothing and smiled artificial grins. You arrived with depth, presence, and an intensity that forced people face what they had been avoiding. They claim they want genuine, but what they actually want is something real enough to keep me interested, not anything that will challenge me. They appreciate the concept of depth until it makes them think about things they don't want to talk about. You didn't simply say what was true, you lived it. And those who are accustomed to shallow, superficial settings don't know how to deal with it. They can't live without noise, distractions, and emotional distance. You, on the other hand, go in like quiet with something that makes them feel bad. You weren't too much. You were too right to be conscious. You heard what they didn't say. You noticed what they were trying to conceal. You could see the suffering behind the show. And people don't want to be noticed unless they can change the lights. They didn't depart because you were too much for them. They fled because you were too full. And folks who are still running on empty can't get it. Your emotional intelligence wasn't scary because it was loud. It was scary because it was true. You asked questions they didn't want to ask themselves because you love them so much. You came into a world that likes to keep things apart and made people be genuine. And that's not something most people are ready to do. So when they think you're too much, translate it, right? What they're actually expressing is that they aren't ready for this degree of honesty, depth, or connection. And that's okay because someone else isn't ready for it yet. They have been looking for it. You were made to be easy to digest. You were made to be remembered. While others choke on the shallow, you keep swimming in the deep. Number 7, your development made them liars without you uttering a thing. When you had dreams they couldn't see, they labeled you crazy. You were told you were unstable when you dared to heal out loud. Laugh at you behind your back. You were the joke in places you never went into because your progress made others uncomfortable before it became clear. But the craziest thing was that you didn't respond. You didn't fight back. You just changed. That was your way of getting back at them. Your development made them shut up since everything they said about you is now falling apart in front of their eyes. You didn't ask for proof. You turned into it. You didn't have to tell anybody about your transformation. Your life began to scream it. And now the folks who were so sure they knew you are rushing to change their story, hoping no one recalls how loud they were when they said you'd never amount to anything. They're not simply ashamed, they're also exposed. And since you didn't have to pay back for your promotion, it arrived with grace while they were engaged in turmoil. While they were telling people you were lost, you were doing the hard job. You were discovering parts of yourself that others were too scared to face. And now you're here, bright, steady, and concentrated. And the same people who called you broken are now silent. You didn't have to show them they were incorrect. Life did it for you. Now they're hiding from the reality that looks like you. Because your accomplishment didn't only make them seem dumb, it made them seem false. It demonstrated how quickly they would talk about something they didn't understand. It showed how simple it was for them to break their promises. Your growth made them liars without you having to utter a thing. That's why they don't feel good. That's why they can't look you in the eye. Not because they still believe you're wrong, but because they realize you were right. And deep down, they realize that if they had treated you better, they might have been in the tail they are now attempting to delete. But they didn't see it. And that fact bothers them more than anything you could ever say. And number 8, you're not only hard to adore. You need people to learn to adore you. You are not hard to adore. You simply won't let others feel tall by shrinking. You don't beg for breadcrumbs or act stupid to maintain the peace. You love totally fearlessly and with a unique sort of clarity. That alone makes most individuals unqualified. Not because you're impossible, but because you're a mirror that shows them how much work they still have to do. You don't need a lot of care since you were never supposed to be cared for. People were supposed to meet you at your level with honesty, purpose, and presence. A lot of individuals claim they desire a profound relationship, but what they really want is closeness that is easy to get. They want someone who is weak enough to sue them, but not powerful enough to fight them. But that's not how you work. You don't need to be flawless. You need to be held accountable. You don't need someone to praise you. You need someone who will tell you the truth. Someone who is spiritually aware enough to appreciate your energy and emotionally fluent enough to comprehend your silence. That's not common. You don't want someone to make you whole. You are already complete. But such fullness scares those who still need turmoil to feel alive. You've worked hard to confront your fears, put a name to your wounds, and use your anguish to help others. You don't fall for the illusions or the love bombing. You wait, you look, you decide, and that type of patience makes you untouchable. To those who are still dominated by their emotions, to love you is to become better. To love you is to stop playing the ego's games and enter a place of genuine honesty. It's not about always being sure. It's about growing together. That isn't something most people are accustomed to. They think that calm is boring and depth is hard. But you were never meant to be funny. You were sent to lift up. So, no, you're not hard to adore. You are simply not simple to employ wrongly. Anyone who can see you clearly will see that your standards aren't walls. They're not meant to keep love out, but to keep distortion out. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for what's genuine. And if they can't meet you there, that's not your loss. It's their limitation. Number 9. You're being punished for the part they allocated you in their dream. You're not being punished for who you are. You're being punished for who they assumed you'd always remain. They built a version of you in their imagination that made them feel strong, in charge, and comfortable. Maybe in the beginning you performed that role, quietly taking disrespect over giving, keeping small, swallowing pain to maintain the peace. And they grew accustomed to it. They established their identity on your cooperation. They expected your quiet, your commitment, your gentleness, even your sorrow. It serviced them. It allowed them to avoid themselves. But something changed. You began to wake up. You began asking questions, creating boundaries, regaining aspects of yourself you had buried to make them feel comfortable. You stopped being the caregiver of their dysfunction, and suddenly you weren't performing your role anymore. That's when the assaults began. Not because you wronged them, but because you refused to remain in character. They weren't ready for the healed version of you. The version that said no. The version that quit explaining yourself. The version that didn't flinch when they withdrew permission or attempted to guilt-trip you. That version disturbed their fantasy. And instead of developing alongside you, they turned against you. They told others you changed. that you deceived them. But what they truly meant was you stopped being who I needed you to be for my own comfort. They made your revolution about their ego. They didn't care about your recovery. They worried that it inconvenienced the character they placed you in. Because the minute you stood up for yourself, they had to either grow or make you the villain. And most picked the easier way. They attacked, slandered, ghosted, or gossiped, yet deep down they know the truth. You didn't betray them. You simply quit betraying yourself. You didn't break the connection. They ruined the delusion and blamed you for the repercussions. Let them chat. Let them pout. Let them play victim to a tale they concocted to evade responsibility. Because one day they'll understand you weren't a character in their narrative. You were a complete developing soul who just outgrew the script and your unwillingness to shrink. That was your breakthrough, not their treachery. Number 2 in your presence was a gateway, but they used it like a playground. You weren't simply another link, another buddy, another person going through their lives. You were a portal, and chance to change, to grow, to break cycles. They didn't even realize they were jammed in. You came into their lives with purpose, not to dominate them, not to rescue them, but to trigger something old and buried inside them. A higher version of oneself that only some souls may awaken. But instead of acknowledging the gift you were, they treated you like a game. They believed they were outsmarting you, that you were naive, that you didn't notice the manipulation, the gaslighting, the half-truths, the double standards. They misunderstood your elegance for gullibility. They misunderstood your quiet for bewilderment. But here's the truth. You saw it everything. And yet you gave them the benefit of the doubt. Not because you were blind, but because you were expecting the true them would rise to meet your presence. They couldn't manage that amount of thought, that level of responsibility. It was simpler to play than to change. Easier to project than to self-reflect. So they picked the playground over the gateway. They derided what they didn't comprehend. They misused your energy. And now they're stuck repeating the same destructive habits with other individuals. Chasing highs that don't last. Searching for significance in empty areas. Because the one person who held the key to their recovery no longer answers the door. Your access is turned off. Not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. You can't keep delivering the divine to people who see it as garbage. You can't keep bleeding insight into settings that merely want amusement. The reality is they were never ready for what you carried. And that's all right. But what's not right is how they attempted to minimize it while yet secretly relying on it. Now they're discovering what they believed was simply vibrations was truly vision. What they believed was merely presence was power. And what they believed was merely attention was an assignment. They messed with what was holy and lost access to what was transforming. That's not your loss. That's the spiritual delay. A number. You didn't lose your mind. You outgrew their constricted reality. They claimed you were losing your mind. They murmured about how off you appeared. They scoffed at your insides, rolled their eyes at your beliefs, and characterized your sensitivity as weakness or instability. But what they couldn't see, what they still can't see, is that you didn't lose your mind. You expanded it. You didn't detach from reality. You detached from their reality. A world constructed on illusions, diversions, artificial personalities, and thin relationships. You outgrew the simulation the minute you began detecting the deeper layers, seeing through artificial grins, sensing energy changes, interpreting the spiritual weight underlying people's words. They became uneasy. You didn't only hear people anymore. You felt them. You didn't merely watch behavior. You knew why it was occurring. You began to shop for denial, to awake from manipulation, and to those still sleeping. That type of awareness seems like crazy. But let's be clear. It wasn't psychosis. It was perception. You began detecting patterns they couldn't explain. You knew stuff you weren't meant to know. You'd meet folks and quickly sense the upheaval they hadn't talked about. You'd enter rooms and sense the residue of spiritual battle in the air before anybody had spoke a word. That's not craziness. That's spiritual discernment. That's the gift of seeing, the type that threatens everything. Surface-level individuals develop their identity upon, and since they couldn't access it, they derided it because they couldn't control it. They rejected it. They selected the easy excuse you're insane. It helped them sleep at night. It offered them a false feeling of superiority over something they secretly coveted but didn't comprehend. But their denial doesn't alter the facts. You were barely ahead. You walked out of the little box. They attempted to keep you in. You exited the matrix. You stopped pretending not to notice. You got sensitive to things they're still numb to. And instead of questioning how you got there, they dismissed you. But deep inside, they know they felt it. Even if their lips denied it, their soul sensed your frequency had altered. So, no, you didn't lose your mind. You merely quit living within the one they wanted to confine you in. And that to the restricted would always appear like crazy. Number your restrictions were an affront to their manipulating method. You weren't being unkind when you established limits. You were being clear. You weren't being heartless when you stopped expressing yourself. You were being sensible. But to the folks who thrived off your uncertainty, guilt, and overfunctioning, your clarity seemed like an insult. They didn't adore you for your independence. They adored you for your access. And once that access came with conditions, their real colors weren't only shown. They were exposed. They weren't accustomed to you saying no without a minute explanation. They were accustomed to tugging your strings with guilt, silence, or subtle violence. Your sympathy was their playground. Your allegiance was their leverage. And as long as you were attempting to preserve the peace, they had authority. But the minute you began listening to your inner knowledge and recognizing your own limitations, they panicked. Not because you mistreated them, but because you stopped being accessible to be utilized. You weren't being theatrical. You were safeguarding your peace. But they made you feel like you were being selfish, disloyal, even poisonous. That's what manipulators do. They alter the script because in their universe, your boundary is a betrayal. Your quiet is a danger. Your resistance to entertain dysfunction is you evolving. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that didn't know better. But here's the truth. Your limits didn't damage them. They exposed them. They underlined how much they depended on your incapacity to say no. They were never prepared for you to wake up, recover, and quit playing their game. And now, with no emotional access, no control, no response to influence, they're starved. So they do what starving egos do. They develop storylines where they're the victim and you're the villain. But deep inside, even they realize your insight wasn't harshness. It was rectification. You stopped giving them something they didn't deserve, and that insulted their entitlement. You didn't turn frigid. You became aware. And for those who relied on your unconscious self to boost their ego, that's a really dangerous threat. Your limits weren't the issue. What they did to them was. And your recovery finally reached the ended number. You never requested to be better. You were simply daring enough to go first. You never went around seeking to be the one who stands out. You didn't sign up to be better than everyone else. If you're being honest, all you truly wanted was quiet, safety, and some clarity. But life didn't make things easy for you. It gave you a chance to break. And instead of running away from it as most people do, you leaned in. You let it demolish all of your hopes and dreams. You learned to think this way about yourself. You let it get to you. Not because you liked the suffering, but because you knew deep down that the only way out was through. Most individuals would do whatever to keep from reaching their breaking point. They divert, deny, project, and medicate. But you stand in front of the fire. You didn't make it numb. You let it catch fire. You let the quiet shout. You let the sadness eat you up. And it's not because you're a superhero. You were weary of acting like you were. I'm sick of smiling through the agony. Sick of hiding behind masks. I'm sick of claiming I'm all right. When your soul was screaming, you let the breakdown happen then. And that choice made everything different. Because what seemed like weakness was really your warrior moment. You let rock bottom educate you. You took off all of your fake identities. You asked questions about everything. The darkness taught you the difference between who you were told to be and who you really are. That's where your light originated from. Not because you want to be better than everyone else, but because you are more authentic than you've ever been. People now notice your power, clarity, and shine and think you've always had them. They don't know it was made in the dark. They don't know where it originated from. You asked God to take away the agony. They don't know that you got your strength when you believed you had nothing left. You aren't better. You are more daring. They were braver than the ones who remained at the surface level. You were braver than the people who made fun of you when you were getting well, because you let yourself fall apart in a society that punishes weakness. So no, you never requested to improve. You simply need to quit acting. You learned from a hardship, and now your light hurts others who are still scared of the dark. You have already won. Number. You weren't brought here to be loved initially. You were brought here to be misunderstood first. You weren't brought here to be praised right away. You were sent to shake things up, stir people up, and question the rules that make them feel safe. Because of it, people were always going to feel uncomfortable around you before they were ever thankful. You weren't sent to be adored. First, you were sent to be misunderstood. It's a component of the work. They couldn't quite figure you out. The one they made fun of, ignored, or let go of. They said you were too quiet, too serious, too emotional, and too strange. Anything that will limit you and make you easier to handle. But what they truly meant was that you don't match the roles we usually play. Your honesty was too sharp, your frequency was too high for the environment, and your vision was too broad. You weren't simply different. You were set aside by God, and because of it, you were alone early on. Not because you were doing anything bad, but because your spirit couldn't connect with things that were shallow. You attempted to fit in, connect, and make yourself less noticeable so you could feel normal. But it never worked. Because deep down, you weren't meant to fit in. You were sent to change things up. But you had to travel alone first before you could lead anybody out. Being alone wasn't a punishment. It was keeping it safe. What appeared like rejection was really protection from individuals who weren't ready to embrace you. God didn't conceal you because you weren't ready yet. He concealed you since they weren't. Your isolation was never about being behind. It was about staying safe till the appropriate moment came. Until the platform could handle your truth. Until the place was made to hold your voice. Until the crowd could hear your frequency. When you are selected, there is never any applause. It all begins with being left behind. Because heaven has a plan. Before they are crowned, the frigid ones are sent out. The ones who are supposed to carry fire always go through it first. So if they got it wrong, you lied to them or departed, don't worry. That's your proof. You weren't sent to be the first one spotted. You were sent to become until all that is destined for you lines up not with the version they desired, but with the reality you have always known. So here you are, the chosen one, still standing, still gleaming, and still growing despite being misunderstood, misjudged, mistreated, and misnamed. You've been labeled everything except the truth. People have made fun of you for being quiet and punished you for speaking out. You have grown out of friendships, families, belief systems, and even whole timelines that sought to keep you in. And through it all, you didn't simply get through it. You changed. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to filter, to shake up foundations that were never solid to begin with, to upset what was phony, and to carry a truth so raw and painful that others would sooner send you away than grow with you. And yet, even when they weren't there, you never lost who you were, even when others questioned you. You didn't cease being able to tell. You didn't allow being turned down make you tough. You let it make you better. They claimed you were too deep. You showed that they were too shallow. They said you were hard to deal with. You showed that they simply weren't ready. They attempted to make you feel bad about waking up. You made it your anointing. By now, you know that to rise, you have to separate. Not because you're better than everyone else, but because you can handle things that not everyone can. Your path has to be different. Your classes needed to be more stressful. Your light had to shine through the dark and your presence. It had to be won via quiet, alone time, and holy pain. But things are changing. The timelines are getting closer. What used to make you an outsider is now what makes you a model. The reality they used to deny is now the truth they are running toward. And while they were busy spreading rumors, you were busy making things right. Don't be sorry about being turned down. Don't be angry about being alone. That was the cocoon. That was the womb. That was the holy place where God kept you safe, healed you, and gave you the keys to a life that no one can take or ruin. So go ahead and stroll with confidence. Not as someone who has to explain, prove, or persuade, but as someone who understands you weren't merely picked. You were made, and everything you lost, The evidence was everything that shattered and left. They didn't bury you. They unintentionally planted you. And this flower was never supposed to be silent. If this message moved you, go ahead and like, comment, and share it with another chosen one who is going through the same divine refining. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell, so you won't miss another searing clip or soul awakening truth. This is more than just material. This is proof. Keep unique, keep grounded, and stay selected. If this message struck you, wait, truth often does, hard, raw, and impossible to deny. Don't simply sit there with it. Go with it. Sign up for this channel. This forum is for souls like yours, truly refined and ascending, who are sick of shallow chatter and want to walk in deep divine truth. Leave a remark below to let everyone know you're not broken. You're becoming. Your narrative is powerful, and your voice is part of a spiritual revolution. Give this video a thumbs up. Let that like be your agreement with a higher version of you if it validates something you already knew but needed to hear out loud. Give this to someone who has likewise been turned down, misunderstood, and misjudged, and who is about to understand that they were picked for a greater reason. This isn't simply a channel. It's a soul tribe, a safe place for those who are different. And your membership is more than just a follow. It's a statement. I know who I am now. You didn't get here by chance. You were brought here. So keep in touch. Stay safe and keep going up. For this reason, this is just the start. God bless you.